The house at 755 15th Street in Boulder was still wrapped in Christmas when the sun came up on December 26, 1996. Strings of lights glowed faintly in the pale morning, and half-emptied toys lay scattered around the living room. Inside, John and Patsy Ramsey moved through the quiet halls, thinking they were waking to the slow, peaceful day after a holiday. That calm shattered when Patsy walked down the back staircase toward the kitchen and saw a piece of paper spread across one of the wooden steps, a note written in thick black marker on legal-sized pages. It told her their 6-year-old daughter, JonBenét, had been taken. The note claimed to be from a small foreign faction. It demanded $118,000, a number that matched John Ramsey's recent bonus almost exactly. It warned them not to contact police and instructed John to bring the money in small bills. Patsy took in only fragments before panic took over. She screamed for John and grabbed the phone. At 5:52 a.m., her voice shook through a 911 call, reporting a kidnapping and begging for help. Within minutes, Boulder officers were on their way to what they thought was a ransom case. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was a first grader, a little girl with big brown eyes, a wide smile, and a world already divided between normal childhood and public attention. She loved riding her bike and playing with friends, but she was also a regular on the child beauty pageant circuit. Photos of her in glittering dresses and crowns would soon cover every screen and every front page in America. To the outside world, she became almost a symbol. At home, she was simply the youngest child of a prosperous family. On Christmas night, the Ramseys had gone to a dinner party at the home of family friends. They returned home around 9 that evening. JonBenét fell asleep in the car and was carried up to bed. The rest of the night, according to the family, was uneventful. There were no shouts, no broken glass, no signs of a stranger forcing his way in. Whatever happened began in the quiet hours after the family went to sleep and before Patsy found the note on the stairs. When officers arrived, they found a house that did not look like a typical abduction scene. There was no obvious point of forced entry. The note, unusually long for a ransom demand, ran nearly 3 pages, switching tone between dramatic threats and detailed instructions. Police later believed it had been written inside the house, using materials from the Ramsey home. John and Patsy, reeling from fear, called friends and their pastor to come support them. As people arrived, they moved through the rooms, sat in the kitchen, and tried to comfort the parents, unknowingly disturbing what should have been a locked-down crime scene. Detectives began searching for any sign of how JonBenét could have been taken. They checked doors and windows, looked for footprints in the snow, and questioned the Ramseys. Hours passed. At one point, officers asked John Ramsey to search the house from top to bottom, in case the kidnappers had left some clue the police had missed. Just after 1 in the afternoon, John went to the basement, entered a little-used storage room, and found his daughter's body on the floor. JonBenét was lying on her back, covered with a white blanket. A piece of duct tape had been placed over her mouth. A cord was wrapped around her neck and tied to a makeshift garrote fashioned from a broken paintbrush handle. Her wrists were loosely bound. John picked her up, carrying her upstairs in pure, raw instinct, and laid her on the carpeted floor near the Christmas tree. Officers arriving in that space faced a nightmare they had not expected. What had begun as a kidnapping was now a homicide. An autopsy later concluded that JonBenét died from a combination of strangulation and a blow to the head. There were signs that she had been struck hard enough to fracture her skull and that she had been strangled with the cord tightened around her neck. There were also indications of possible sexual assault, though the exact nature was never conclusively resolved. Toxicology tests showed no sign of drugs in her system. Investigators now had to answer questions that were much harder than those of a ransom demand. Who had been inside the house that night? And why had a child been murdered in her own home? From the first hours of the investigation, attention focused on the ransom note. Handwriting experts pointed out its unusual length, the theatrical language, and the way it seemed to imitate lines from popular movies. The amount demanded, exactly matching John's bonus, made detectives wonder if the writer had specific knowledge of his finances. The note referred to the family's good Southern common sense, a phrase that sounded to some as if it were written by someone who knew their background. At the same time, the note contained odd spelling errors and shifts in tone that looked staged. Outside the house, the case turned into a media storm. The image of JonBenét in pageant costumes ran beside more ordinary family photos, feeding public fascination and criticism. Talk shows debated her parents' choices. Reporters camped outside the Ramsey home and followed them wherever they went. Every leak from inside the investigation fueled new theories. Some believed an intruder had slipped into the basement and attacked her. Others believed someone in the family had been involved and that the kidnapping note was a cover. Forensic evidence gave investigators fragments, but not a full picture. A broken window in the basement suggested a possible entry point, but it may have been damaged earlier. A suitcase sat below it, as if someone had considered using it to climb. A small amount of unidentified male DNA was found on JonBenét's underwear and clothing, but the technology of the late 1990s could not clearly match it to a suspect. Fibers from Patsy's clothing were found on the duct tape and the cord, which might have meant contact during or after the crime, or simply the transfer that happens inside a family home. In 1998, a grand jury was convened to review the case. After months of testimony, the jurors reportedly voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges related to child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. The district attorney, Alex Hunter, chose not to sign the indictments, stating that he did not believe he could prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. The existence of those votes remained sealed for years, leaving the public to assume no charges had come close. As the years passed, the case moved in and out of the spotlight. Investigators changed. The Ramseys moved away from Boulder. Patsy Ramsey died of cancer in 2006, still insisting on her family's innocence. New district attorneys reviewed the file, each bringing a different approach. In 2008, after more advanced DNA testing, then DA Mary Lacey publicly cleared John Ramsey and his son Burke, stating that the unknown male DNA on JonBenét's clothing likely belonged to an outside intruder. That announcement did not end debate. Other experts argued that the DNA could have come from manufacturing or handling and should not rule out people inside the house. For all the attention, the most important facts remain simple and brutal. On Christmas night, a 6-year-old girl went to bed in a safe, prosperous home. By midday on December 26th, she was found dead in her own basement. A ransom note sat at the heart of the mystery, a document that may have been written to mislead investigators or to buy time. The physical evidence points in several directions, but does not settle on one. Somewhere between the quiet ride home from a holiday dinner and the moment her father carried her body up the basement stairs, JonBenét's life was taken by someone who has never faced a jury. Decades later, the Ramsey house has changed owners, the Christmas decorations are long gone, and the city of Boulder has moved on to other headlines. But inside cold case rooms and private files, her case still sits, a reminder that even the most high-profile investigations can stall without a final answer. The story continues to pull people back because of the contrast between the bright, public photos of a little girl on stage and the unanswered questions hiding in the shadows of her home. Thank you for listening to Homicide Files. Subscribe for more true crime stories.